More than one-third of Australians who are under pressure to meet their loan repayments have dropped out of a financial hardship application. The latest review by the corporate regulator has pointed the finger at some banks and lenders, accusing them of abandoning borrowers and making it too difficult for them to apply for assistance. We'll hear more from a media conference by ASIC in the next hour, but now I'm joined by its chair, Joe Longo. Joe, thanks so much for your time. Is there a little bit more than meets the eye here? Because a lot of people did get assistance. Has some of this been due to customers dropping out of the program because their circumstances have changed?
Well, the key here is that we're talking about existing customers of the banks, and they're under an obligation to consider in a prompt manner what are known as hardship applications. Now, I think all the banks actually and all lenders are capable of some uplift in their performance here. There's no doubt the banks have improved. We wrote to them last August. But these applications, by their very nature, are made by people who are really vulnerable. They're victims perhaps of family violence, they've lost their jobs, or they've victim to a serious illness. So these applications need to be very carefully handled. And what we're saying is, the banks need to improve.
So the big banks, or were they smaller lenders? Who do you have most concern about?
Yeah. When you read the report, we focused on 10 lenders. Some of those are banks, some of them are non-banks. I think it's fair to say that the banks did better than the non-banks. I think that reflects a little bit their superior resourcing, and larger banks did better than smaller banks. So that's where we landed on that.
Joe, what is the problem as you conducted this report? Was the biggest concern that banks weren't at the ready to help, there was a lack of communication, or they weren't willing to do so?
Yeah, well, there are a number of issues. I think the banks have said they're willing, obviously, to address hardship applications, but it really is a case of over-promising and under-delivering. So a hardship application can be made in any form. So if you're a customer of a bank, the law doesn't say how to do it. You bring your problem to the attention of the bank, and then it's up to the bank to have systems and processes to listen. And what we've discovered was that in too many instances, the process was so bureaucratic, it was so complicated, that customers became discouraged. And so you needed to have, frankly, quite a level of perseverance and patience to engage with the bank. So a good example, for example, is that, and this is in the report, that someone like Sumit, who's named in the report, he had to communicate with the bank 6 times before his application got treated as a hardship application. In the case of Amy, she was on the phone for an hour and then just got disconnected, that kind of thing. So it's really requires consumers to be very resilient and disciplined to get the attention of the bank. That's what has to improve.
Joe, do you think that's by design, that they make it so difficult, or is that too cynical?
Yeah. I think it's fair to say that the banks went into this treating this more as an operational commercial risk sort of process, rather than putting the customer at the centre of their systems and processes. So in my view, I think the banks do acknowledge that they need to put customers at the centre of what they do, and they need to up their game with training and with the way they engage with their customers. I don't think it's intentional. The banks, the lenders that we engage with in this review were very cooperative, and indeed, along the way, made improvements in their processes. So I think there's hope. I think we need to acknowledge there's hope, but we've got to keep at it.
Yeah, and no one's perfect. I mean, look at this story in the Australian today, and ASIC is being criticised as well for not alerting Australians to a scam, a celebrity scam. In fact, I was a feature of, I think, operating out of Serbia. Is that fair criticism? Would you like to respond to that?
Well, I'm certainly aware of that matter, of that investigation. But for today's purposes, for operational reasons, I really can't tell your viewers a lot more about it. We're taking it very seriously, except the concern that's been run in the media. But for this morning's purposes, all I can do is reassure your viewers that we're taking it very seriously. But hopefully, we'll have something more to say about that in the coming weeks.
Oh, good. I appreciate that. Yeah, I appreciate that was a question without notice. But I think a lot of people are seeing scams, and I think, you know, we all think we're pretty good at spotting them these days, but they're getting more and more sophisticated.
Yes.
Could you talk about more generally what kind of caseload, what kind of work ASIC is doing for this? Is this taking up a lot more of your time, for example?
Yeah. The scams are absolutely a major priority for us. We're working very closely with the ACCC. We've been getting special funding from the government. Yeah. We're using a special service to take down fraudulent websites. Again, there's some hope here. We're seeing the losses from scams coming down a little bit the last 12 months, and we think part of that is the impact of the educational campaign on investors and consumers. So even in my own day-to-day interactions with a range of people, there's a much higher awareness now, I think, even from 12 months or 2 years ago, about avoiding the most obvious kinds of scams. Having said that, they remain a cancer on the economy. The people behind these scams are they're very well resourced. They're industrialised and sophisticated. They're offshore. So this is a war, if you like, that is going to continue for some time, and it's going to require the cooperation and collaboration of a range of regulators and government to deal with. The only other thing I'd say about scams, if we have a moment, is that this is an area where the banks have made a lot of improvement as well. They've stepped up in a number of ways. Clearly, there's a way to go. The government's working on some scam codes, and so there's still a lot of work ahead of us. But this is another area where we expect the banks to play their role.
Yeah, and AI is just getting more and more sophisticated, where, you know, my own dad had to check whether I was actually saying the things that I was saying, Joe. It would be remiss of me not to put this on your radar as well. The AFR reported last week a lack of motivation of your staff and stress levels. It probably goes to what you just talked about, the caseload you've got there. Is there a pot culture at ASIC? Is it, you know, any better than any other business?
I think in an organisation like ours, from time to time, it's an opportunity for renewal. The culture results from over 7 months ago now were mixed. But I'm very confident that there's a number of changes going on at ASIC. And indeed, in any organisation of our size and complexity, change is something that we all have to address and deal with. And so I'm very proud of the work that ASIC staff do. But there's clearly work ahead of us to make sure we demonstrate support for our staff, in a range of areas. The other thing I'd say about the culture at ASIC at the moment is we're going through a very significant period of renewal. So we have 3 new commissioners who've started the last 6 months. Some very senior executive roles are about to open up at ASIC. So there's a lot going on that goes to the capability of the organisation, and I think the staff are very supportive of that. But equally, they too need support and the feeling that their work is valued, and I'm very optimistic about that.
And as chair, do you think you'd have to be transparent and seen to be transparent? Is that a critical component of how you operate by example?
I think that's a really good point. I've been doing a lot of work in more recent times, really personally demonstrating that leadership. I think staff do expect from the chair and from the commission transparency and visibility into what we're doing, why we're doing it. And the other thing I think that's really important is that staff need to feel they're being listened to. So at the moment, we're going through quite an intensive period of discussion in small groups among the staff. So again, I'm very optimistic about where this is going and about the future. But clearly, good change means being open and transparent with staff, and that's exactly what I'll be doing and am doing.
Well, thank you for your time today. We look forward to speaking to you again soon.
Thank you, Laura.